Hi, welcome to our first session on restoring empathy and reducing burnout. If you've seen the introduction, you know we're going to do a series of podcasts or mini blogs, however we want to call this, throughout April, May, and June on talking about what is burnout, what can we do about burnout, how to identify it, and how it impacts our life, both in the workplace and in our home life. And then we're going to move to a second part, which will talk about empathy and how we can rebuild it, how we can regain it, how we can be reinvested into our jobs, into our home life if we're dealing with burnout. Along the way in this journey, we'll have some speakers, as we mentioned, but we'll also be talking about some of the more serious side effects if you haven't dealt with burnout, such as compassion fatigue, secondary and vicarious trauma, and those impacts that could lead to other mental health issues that can be clinically diagnosed. And we want to really look at this in a broad way so you know what you need to do for your own self-care, because ultimately this is what it comes back to. It's about how you take care of yourself in times of high pressure, high needs, crisis situations. And for many of you that are reading this or seeing this, hearing this, you're going to be dealing with frontline pressures and a lot of crisis situations. So it's good that we take this time and really distill what burnout is so you can understand where you are in this continuum. And then you know where you have to go for help and you know what type of help you may need. If at any time you have intrusive thoughts or you're feeling overwhelmed and that might be leading to thoughts of suicide, please reach out first of all to 988. That's a new resource from CAMH, and it's amazing. Our own Crisis Intervention Center, we have some amazing workers down there. Or we also have the resources of Tracey Logan, who is a registered psychotherapist that our wonderful partner, CMHA, Hastings Prince Edward, Addictions and Mental Health Services, has brought in to help folks in the frontline positions. And of course, frontline includes EMS, police, fire, and frontline social service workers. And of course, nursing staff and those who might be manning the ER. So we have to talk about what burnout is. And we have to acknowledge that burnout happens to just about everyone, regardless where you are in your life and what's going on. Based on circumstances, based on how busy you are, based on how stretched you get in both your workplace and your personal life, you get so busy that you forget to do those important pieces of checking in with yourself and understanding your self-care and what you need because you're giving out to everyone else. It's truly that not filling your cup and that your cup just becomes empty and there's nothing left. We're all aware that there are people in the workplace that are dealing with families, children, teenagers, but also dealing with aging parents and taking care of their needs. It's a period of run from the morning someone gets up till they go back to sleep. And there's nothing in between to restore or reinvest in yourself. And I'm going to speak that from that perspective. You don't reinvest in yourself for that self-care that you need to give out to others. So if we forget to step back, if we forget to read a good book, or we forget to go for walks, or we don't interact with our animals, or we quit talking to our partners, or if we just withdraw and we don't restore, then burnout occurs. And when that happens, it keeps you from being productive. It keeps you from engaging with your family. If you think about it, we've all worked with people who have become cynical, sarcastic, caustic, resentful, when they were actually really engaged and helpful and really invested in doing the work. And over time, you see this shift. And that's burnout. That's some of the signs that you're seeing, that someone has given so much, there's nothing left. And the effects of burnout, like I said, can hurt your home life, your social life for sure, and obviously the impact on your work. And long-term burnout can make you more vulnerable to colds and flu. I'm not saying anything at this current time. I am battling the flu. Maybe have to do some inward work on my own. However, what I'm trying to say here and using some humor is that if you're seeing these signs in yourself, it's really time to say, what can I do to take care of me? In fact, it's time to say, I need to take care of me, and it needs to happen now. And then following some of the information you get here and what I said earlier when we opened the podcast, taking that time and really knowing where you need to get the support. If we're going to talk about burnout over the coming weeks, we have to understand what types of burnout there is. Now, there's going to be those that are very clinical right now watching this going, Sandy, there is no such thing as a diagnosed burnout. And you're absolutely right. It's not a clinical piece. It's not something we can take medication for. There's not a cognitive behavior therapy group for burnout per se. But for the purposes of what we're doing here, we're going to look at 4 types of burnout. And hopefully you can see where you might land in this. There's the overloaded burnout, and I suspect many people are feeling that right now. There's just so much going on. We're hammered with different things, whether it's on Facebook, in the media, or in our day-to-day work, of how bad things seem to be. And it's really hard to find the positives in all that negative, especially when you're bombarded with it. And so you try to work harder to make a difference, because maybe if you can make a change, then it's going to make the workplace better. It's going to help the people that are so vulnerable. It's going to change everybody's outlook, and everyone will be happy again. That's not going to happen. All it does is make you risk your health and your personal life to try and chase something that won't make a difference, because what we're dealing with right now is that vulnerable people are impacting our day-to-day. You cannot work so hard to try to fix something that you break yourself. And that's essentially what overload burnout is. And it's not going to be one person to fix what's happening in our community, in our county, in our country. It is going to take a collective group of people who are healthy to make sure that this work gets done. Another type of burnout is the under-challenged burnout. And I don't know how many people might be experiencing this that have tuned into this podcast. However, it is when you don't feel that you have enough that challenges your skill set, that you're not being appreciated for what you can bring to the table, and maybe you don't have learning opportunities that help you grow in your role to help with making your job more fulfilling, or that the work you do more impactful. And what happens is you get bored and then you disengage. Through that boredom, you go, why bother? Nothing I do makes an impact. Nobody values what I bring to the table. No one sees what I could do, so why do I even make an effort? That disengagement, that happens, and we see it. Managers and supervisors see it time and time again. And that is when you need to have a talk, or when you need to reach out and see what more you could be doing, or what areas you could be engaged in. I'm not going to talk more about how you deal with it to be re-engaged at this point, but there are a couple of things that will be discussed later in the series. And if you're feeling that right now, in that boredom and not appreciated, or that you're not given the full scope of what you can do, start to look at where you want to go in the organization, or what you think you could contribute outside of your job role. And then maybe it's to having that conversations. And we'll talk about how you do that later. But start thinking about that if this resonates with you. I tend to think we're seeing more overloaded burnout when I'm talking to people, but I suspect the under-challenged burnout exists as well. The next burnout I want to review is called neglect burnout. And this is when you might be feeling helpless if things aren't going right, or if things are going just hugely wrong, that you're responsible. We see this sometimes. People have imposter syndrome under this umbrella of burnout, that you don't feel that you have the skills to do the job, that your abilities and your talents, you just doubt them. And then what happens is you're not taking care of yourself, and tied into that imposter syndrome. You never feel that you belong, that you don't do the self-care because you don't deserve to. And you start to neglect yourself, which leads again to a disengagement and walking away and burning out from the position. And it's done because you don't feel, I don't want to say worthy, because that's not, imposter syndrome and all that stuff is kind of tied up with those kind of feelings, but you just don't feel that you've been placed in the role where you have the skills to do the job, when in fact you do. But your lens is kind of, it's kind of dark, and when you're feeling exhausted, you tend to negatively reflect that on yourself. And then this is where we lead to this type of burnout. That's hard. It's a hard one to deal with, because when you're dealing with something similar to imposter syndrome, you never feel that you're good enough. You feel like you're faking it. And then when people compliment you, you don't take them on board because you don't feel you're worthy, and then you're just phony and faking it for everyone to see. So nothing validates, and then that just leads to this other mess where you just feel more and more worthless. And that's a very dangerous cycle to be in. I'm just going to caution you. If this is where you are right now, please reach out to Tracey or some of the information that I gave you at the front, crisis intervention, or talk with someone that you trust. And maybe there's someone, a peer in your workplace, but you really need to connect and really have someone sit with you and go through this to validate that you are, in fact, the perfect person for the role. Finally, the last type of burnout I want to talk about is probably the most serious. It's habitual burnout. And it really happens when your physical and mental health is constantly fatigued, when you're chronically exhausted, when you feel sad, your behavior changes, you never get ahead of it, and it happens over and over and over again. You've done some things in terms of what we look at as common solutions for burnout, maybe move positions, re-engaged, taken a course, but the burnout surfaces quicker, and becomes a chronic pattern on how you operate. And that can sometimes cross over into depression and also suicidal thoughts. So it's very important, if every time you try to get yourself out of a burnout feeling, or that you're trying to work through this and you're not lifting yourself, that you still have those feelings of exhaustion, of disengagement, of just chronically tired, that by the time you get to the workplace, you just want to go home and go to bed. Those are signs that maybe you have to possibly talk to your primary care, maybe reach out to a counselor, but because the burnout is becoming part of your pattern, and it's becoming part of how you live with your roles, and that impacts your wellness on a broader context. And you really really need some support to help move past this and return back to kind of a more balanced approach to both your work and your home life, where you feel restored, where you feel revitalized and re-engaged in all aspects of your life. I think we've all met people that are chronically burnt out and are still in the field, and your heart aches for them because their world is just so gray. There is no highs, no lows. It's just this constant Eeyore. If you think of Eeyore, chronic burnout, chronic sadness, chronic emptiness, I think, for a term. So if you're feeling that, it is time to really reach out and think about getting additional help. This series of podcasts won't fix what's going on. So if you've reached the end of this first episode, congratulations. I didn't know how many people would get to the end of this. It's been pretty depressing if you think about it in terms of what we discussed. But it's good to get this information into your hands so you can start to look for your own type of burnout and what you're experiencing as we progress through the coming weeks. Understanding what you're dealing with, knowing where to reach out for help, those are all part of the patterns of restoring empathy and reducing burnout, and hopefully re-engaging in your whole work-life balance. Thank you for taking this journey with us. As you've noticed, it's been of a learning curve for us. I think we've done this first episode. This is take number 8, because we found out that doing a podcast isn't as easy as it sounds. And I have to give a lot of credit to Alex French, who is the person behind the camera, who's keeping me on track and telling me when things are good and when I have done it badly. So hopefully this gets out to you and we've managed to be successful. And we look forward to sharing information and guest speakers, like I've said, in the coming weeks. We'll have information below, free to reach out. And if you have a comment about age, height, weight, or how I've talked, please don't do it. But if you need for more information or wondering where you can find literature, I'm happy to answer that. So as long as you realize that we're not professionals, but we're trying to bring information to as many people who need it as quickly as possible. It won't be perfect. Sometimes it's not going to be pretty. And I'm sure there's lots of suggestions how we can do it better, but bear with us while we get there. And have a good week. Thanks.